Hello, my name is John Tate and thanks for checking out my new weekly video blog. This week's topic is about stepping into headship. Now my background as a senior leader is that I've just recently completed my MPQH. I've been a deputy head teacher for nearly 3 years now, and I've held two significant roles in two separate leadership teams, taking two different schools from requires improvement to good. So my next logical step up the career ladder is into headship. Now I've been asked this question many times over the last few months and years really, in terms of, are you going to be a head, John? What do you want to do? When are you going to be a head? All those types of questions. And it's really interesting because I think we're currently in a very challenging and dynamic educational landscape that makes it very difficult for young leaders like myself in terms of wanting to make that step or wanting to take that decision into should I become a head, or when should I become a head, or where should I become a head? And I've spoken to lots of people recently, lots of different head teachers, and gained lots of different valuable insights into it. Having read Vic Goddard's book, The Best Head Teacher in the World, I had a good chat with Tom Rees down at the Bet Show in London, and having also spoken to my own head teacher, Andrea Crawshaw. They all keep telling me, John, it's the best job in the world. But it's interesting because I don't think that view is shared with many people at the deputy head level at the moment, and I think there's quite a few concerns and worries about moving into that role. Now, the thing that really prompted me to shoot this video today is I saw on Twitter Teacher Toolkit Ross Morris McGill, and he'd created a poll where he'd asked people on his network whether DFE league tables and Ofsted were actually putting people off moving into headship. And the results, as you can see here, are really surprising and striking. Now, at the time of shooting this, although it hasn't finished yet, there's been over 1,000 responses to Ross's poll, and nearly 75% of all the responses say that yes, DFE league tables and Ofsted are actually kind of really scaring people away from moving into headship. I think that's quite sad. Now, granted, I don't know how many of those 1,000 people are senior leaders or people in my position looking at that next step at the moment, but albeit it's still a worrying number and still a significant proportion of people that are saying that yes, those things would actually be a concern to them. And I think for me it's interesting that I feel that in education at the moment we're kind of what I feel, what I've been calling like in a football manager syndrome, where potentially you're only one bad result or one relegation away from getting the sack. And I think that the same happens in education. You're potentially one set of results or one Ofsted away from potentially losing your job as a head teacher to a certain degree. And I think that's only been intensified with the academy movement and aggressive academy chains sniffing around potentially vulnerable schools. And we only have to look in football at how that's happened there, and you look at people like David Moyes and Steve McLaren, who've taken on big jobs, and at that time they were very confident in their own ability. They knew what they were going to do. They had a vision. They had a plan. And for whatever reason, it didn't work out. And I think that can be the same with schools as well. Is that there might be lots of different reasons why it doesn't work for a head in that school, and it might not be anything to do with the ability of the head, but actually lots of the other things that that come with the job. And I think that also, I don't think anybody is naive enough to think that it's all about just the head teacher or all about you as a leader going into a school. I think everyone who I've worked with and everyone who I've spoken to as well, it's quite clear that yes, you have a vision, and I have a vision in my job, and you come with a vision, you come with a plan, you come with ideas, you come with passion and enthusiasm, you come with all those things. But ultimately, it's the team around you that help create those and help make those things successful. And going to the wrong school at the wrong time, you may find that you haven't got the leadership team that you want, and it's going to take quite a long time to actually build that team because the card or the hand you dealt with maybe isn't as strong as you want it to be. Now, I suppose I mentioned there about the football manager syndrome being a negative, but in one way, we could look at it as a positive, because at least in football, when somebody like Jose Mourinho goes into Manchester United, he takes his whole backroom staff in with him. He knows what he wants to do, he knows the people he wants to work with, and he trusts those people because he's worked with them for a long time previously. And I think that many of us as senior leaders would probably be far more confident in going into a headship, whether it's your first headship or your second headship, if you knew you could take your team with you, the team that you have worked with, that are on the same page with you, that understand everything you do and can implement all those changes to the school and to the vision you want immediately. But obviously it's not that easy. It's not as easy in the real world of education. We can't just suddenly you know, in most cases, you can't just clear a whole leadership team out. Obviously, it happens in certain circumstances, but in lots of times, you have to go in, you have to work with the people you've got, or it takes you a long time to get the team that you actually want there. And so I think that's very, very difficult. And I think that, you know, I think lots of us will probably feel far more confident being able to take your own team in there. And that's something else that is maybe a barrier to people stepping into headship. The third thing as well is that, and I was speaking to a new head teacher, Chris Hildrew, on Twitter the other day, who's been in post in his first headship for just over a year now. And he was saying that for him it wasn't Ofsted, it wasn't league tables that kind of concerned him, but it was actually the current funding crisis that we're seeing now. And actually the lack of money to potentially do the things you want to do as a head, because ultimately as a head, if you've got a vision, you've got a plan, it's gonna rely on funding as well, and all the things you want to do. If you can't do those because of the lack of funding, the lack of money, then that may be where, you know, you are starting to worry about the next Ofsted or the next results in the summer, because you haven't maybe been able to do, you know, or put forward the plan you want, and the funding isn't been there to do the things you do in your last school. So I think those three things combined are starting to concern people. And I think that ultimately it's a very interesting place we find ourselves in, as young leaders coming through the profession and looking at this and looking at the educational landscape and thinking, is it for us? You know, should I be a head teacher? When should I be a head teacher? Where should I be a head teacher? And all those questions are very pertinent at the moment. And you know, I'd like to kind of open the conversation up and, you know, hear from your views. Are you a new head teacher that's taken that step? You know, what were the big decisions that you faced? Are you someone that has jumped back out of education because actually you got to the stage and you didn't want to take that next step, and maybe it wasn't for you? So it'd be interesting to see some views, and you can find those views await me on all the normal channels on the social network or via my blog, or comment here on the YouTube video. And it'd be really interesting to see what people face, you know, the barriers that people face, or the barriers that people have had to jump over to do that. Because I think that, you know, I worry for the profession that some of the best leaders and some of the best young leaders are getting scared away, because of this league table mentality. And I think, unfortunately, while we still rely on league tables and while we still have league tables, the way league tables work is that not everyone can be successful, and someone's always going to have to be at the bottom. And no matter how hard we try, and we talked about accountability, and I'm a strong believer that the accountability in the country in education has massively changed education. It's massively changed for the better over the last 20, 30 years, and it's really risen standards, and it's done a lot of good. But I think it's, you know, it can go the other way, and I think that certainly with, you know, that we can do accountability without league tables. And I think that with league tables, like I say, comes losers, it comes different pressures, and, you know, like we've always said, there's only half of us that can be above average every year, and I think when we've got this high stakes accountability and academy chain sniffing around the corner for the next vulnerable school, I think it's a place that unfortunately some people don't want to be in. So I'd really appreciate your views and your comments, and, you know, fire them away to me on all the usual channels. Thank you.